Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. Kent in the UK is home to New Ash Green. The post-war development harbors a strong feeling of community and a sense of belonging. One of the residents was 46-year-old Sarah Green. Sarah enjoyed a close relationship with her family, and they would regularly meet up for lunch, shopping, and go on holiday together. Her mother said she cared deeply for other people and would always stick up for the underdog. Sarah was a devoted mother to her 5 children who were the center of her world. She would go all out for birthdays and other holidays. She had 2 sons, Jack and Louis, from a previous relationship and 3 children with her partner, 39-year-old Ben Lomé. She worked hard as a boutiquier and would work on evenings and weekends alongside bringing up her children. Her partner Ben Lomé had been born in Greenwich and in the early 2000s he moved to Mallorca with dreams of becoming a pilot. The pair had met in December 2004 on a dating website. He made a good impression with Sarah's 2 sons and Sarah decided to leave her job and she and her 2 boys would move to Mallorca to start afresh with Ben. But the happiness didn't last long. Due to her being unable to speak Spanish, she couldn't find a job, and this coupled with her homesickness made it very difficult for Sarah. Ben also wasn't able to become a pilot, so instead worked at the airport. They subsequently decided to move back to the UK, having already welcomed their first child. After settling into a new 4-bedroom home, 22 bays ashore in New Ash Green, Ben began working as a taxi driver and Sarah would work as a beauty therapist. But the issues in the relationship began to show, with the pair arguing often. Sarah eventually decided to call time on the relationship, and in response, Ben threw her and her 2 sons out whilst keeping the 3 children they had together with him. Ben had arranged a court hearing for the very next morning, in which he said Sarah had abandoned her children and consequently he was awarded custody. Sarah was unable to defend herself as she was unaware as to what was happening. Sarah was devastated. She and her eldest 2 children went to live with her mother and stepfather. The family saved every penny so they could be able to go and see a solicitor for legal advice. And in August 2016, she would be awarded full custody of the children. It was also around this time that her personal life began to move in a more positive direction when she met Neil James. Sarah met Neil on a dating app in 2016 and their relationship would go from strength to strength, culminating in an engagement. But Sarah was worried that if she tried to move in with Neil, Ben would battle her for custody. In 2018, she offered Ben the opportunity for them to live in the house together and cope her and their children despite their romantic relationship coming to an end, something her family had begged her not to do. This wasn't by any means an ideal solution, as emotions between them were still running high, so Sarah decided to try and buy Ben's share of the house from him. Sarah had taken her children to school in the morning before heading to work to see her clients. She was also incredibly excited and happy as she had been able to secure a new, higher-paying job. At around 8 p.m., Sarah was seen coming home and heading inside. She sent several text messages, including to Neil. One message to a friend read, "There's always something to look forward to. You've just got to open your eyes and dream." The last text message was sent at 10 p.m. before she headed to bed. The next day was an incredibly special one, as it was one of her children's birthdays, and like always, she had planned for it. As the morning rolled around, Neil sent her a text message, but Sarah didn't reply. As the hours continued to tick by, Sarah still hadn't responded. Neil decided to reach out to Ben to see if he had seen her. Ben replied saying he thought Sarah was with him as he hadn't seen her either. Neil called Sarah's family and explained that he had been trying to get hold of Sarah since the morning but hadn't been able to make contact with her. Sarah could sometimes forget to charge her phone or accidentally leave it in the car, so her mother decided to call her, too. But like Neil, she couldn't get hold of her. One of Sarah's sons used text messages, social media, and calling her work phone to try and get a response, but there was still nothing from Sarah. By the next day, she still hadn't come home. Her mother kept trying to get hold of her, but as Sarah continued to not respond, her mother knew something was seriously wrong. Everyone was becoming extremely concerned for her. They agreed that if by the next day she hadn't made contact with anyone or come home, they would call the police. It had now been 48 hours since Sarah Green had been seen and she still had not been in contact with anyone. Ben contacted the police. "Can we please switchboard? Hello. I want to report a missing person." "Okay. And how old is this person?" I know her date of birth. It's December 14th, 71. Right. Okay. So, what concerns do you have at the minute?" "Well, she lives with me." "Yeah. She's my children's mom." "Okay. And she's not like we're not together, we just live together sort of thing." "Right. Okay. And she came home Tuesday night." "Tuesday night. And then we all went to bed and then when me and the kids woke up in the morning, she wasn't there." DCI Yvonne Beasley, Senior Investigating Officer with Kent Police, was assigned to investigate her disappearance. Ben told the officers that after Sarah had arrived home on the 9th, he had put the children to bed and gone into his room, which was the loft conversion one, and she had gone to her room on the first floor. He explained that when he had woken up the next morning, Sarah wasn't home, but the car was still parked in its spot. As it was one of her children's birthdays, he said he had expected her to come home. A missing persons investigation was quickly underway, and a search of her bedroom was conducted. One thing immediately stood out. All of Sarah's personal effects were still there, including her money, bank cards, keys, and handbag. These were not things Sarah would have left without. For DCI Yvonne Beasley, this was extremely concerning. As she had left her car at the house, one theory that was considered was that maybe she had gone out for a run or walk and become injured and unable to get help. A 5mm search radius was set up around Sarah's home, going through fields and woodlands to try and find her, even checking hospitals to see if she had been admitted to any of them. In spite of all this, and after an extensive search, there was still no sign of Sarah. There were no phone records to indicate that she had agreed to meet up with anyone that night. DCI Yvonne Beasley noted Ben Lomba's demeanor. He said, "Ben didn't seem to be that concerned. The way he was presenting to us was described to me by my officers as quite odd. He didn't really want to engage with us. He didn't really want us at the house," which for somebody who had reported Sarah missing, he didn't seem to be acting in that way. He also said that officers discovered that Sarah's family had had to pressure Ben into contacting the police in the first place. Sarah's son utilized social media and the close-knit community immediately came together to look for her. Hundreds of people from the local area came in to help. One of the volunteers, Sharon Bryan, noted Ben Lomba's behavior. She said, "We were very baffled with Ben when during day 3 or 4 of our searching, he went into the village office to book the village hall, and we thought it was completely bizarre. There's half the village looking for the mother of his children, and he's trying to arrange a kids' game in the village." Sarah's oldest 2 children attempted to visit their siblings, but were told they weren't allowed. Lomba had taken the 3 youngest to his aunt's house, and he had also started court proceedings to gain custody of them. DCI Beasley said, "Within a few days of her disappearance, Ben had gone to the family court and was trying to have an urgent meeting so he could have primary custody of the children. In order to generate any leads, the police issued a press appeal to get information about Sarah out to the public. But as the days continued to pass, Sarah Green still hadn't been found. Concerns continued to escalate that she may have been met with foul play." Detective Superintendent Paul Featheringham said, "We have experts with specialist technology and forensic scientists working with us to try and find Sarah." Police went back to speak with Ben again to try and better understand the dynamics and ins and outs of the family home. He told them that Sarah would often go missing, disappearing without telling anyone, to go and meet other people. The police went to Neil's house to search the property and ask him further questions, as he was one of the last people she had had contact with. He explained that he had called her at 9:24 on the night she had last been seen. They spoke for around 15 minutes and then sent a few text messages back and forth before they said good night. Phone records showed that this was true, and as he was at home with his daughter at the time, he told the police to check the M25 cameras to prove he hadn't driven to Sarah's. His story checked out and Neil was in the clear. It had now been a week since Sarah Green had seemingly vanished, and police decided to check the local cameras, and more than 15,000 hours of footage would be searched. At around 2 a.m. on the 10th of October, the same time Sarah went missing, CCTV cameras picked up a car driving around. One of the images picked up on camera showed the vehicle with the logo on the driver's side door. Why did this pique the interest of investigators? Because it was similar to the vehicle driven by Ben Lomé, a red taxi with the logo on the driver's side door. But the police had to be sure. They brought in an expert to compare his vehicle to the grainy one on the footage. The expert determined that the footage did show Ben's vehicle around 2 hours after it had first been captured on CCTV. The same vehicle was seen coming back. This appeared to contradict his assertions that he had been at home in bed when Sarah had gone missing. The home had an extensive CCTV system which was operated from Ben's bedroom so he could see the goings-on throughout the house. DCI Beasley said it was quite an elaborate setup. He had cameras at the side, at the front, and at the back of his house, all controlled by an assistant which was kept in his bedroom, which was in the converted attic part of the house. They checked the footage from the day Sarah had vanished. Ben was seen coming home, and nobody else was seen entering the property before Sarah came back. It wasn't just their home that had security cameras. Their neighbor's home did, too. The neighbor's home had 3 months' worth of footage to watch. They could see that the CCTV camera from Ben and Sarah's home had been on almost constantly in the time leading up to Sarah going missing. The footage from the neighbor's house showed the infrared lights coming from Ben's cameras and also showed that after midnight on the day she had last been seen, Ben's cameras had been switched off. Ben said the files from the cameras at his house weren't usable as they had been corrupted and that the complex system in place actually hadn't been working for the past year. Another piece of footage that stood out to investigators showed him coming home. In the footage, his vehicle was clean. After taking the children to school the next day, the car was caught on CCTV again, and this time there was mud and dirt on the sides and wheels. At around 10:30, he went to the office where his taxi company operated. When the car pulls in, the dirt is gone. Another element that stood out was after watching the neighbor's camera. The police learned that he would always park his car in the same spot until the night Sarah had gone missing. That night, he parked it at the back of the property somewhere not covered by the neighbor's CCTV. As detectives searched woodland near the 46-year-old's home today, police said her disappearance had turned into a potential murder investigation. She just had a new job offer that she was looking forward to. She talked to friends about looking forward to the future, but also significantly, she's now missed one of her child's birthdays. Following extensive investigations and inquiries, and also searching, we're now treating this as a potential homicide investigation. The task in front of the officers was huge. They didn't know where Ben had driven to that night and what he had done in the 2-hour window, and Sarah still hadn't been found. The police believed that he had murdered Sarah and then driven her body to a deposition site. On the 20th of December, the decision was made to arrest Ben Leckham on suspicion of the murder of Sarah Green. He was then taken to the station to be questioned. "So, you are under arrest today on suspicion of the murder of your ex-partner. And I understand, current, you still live in the same address. That's Sarah Green. When we're talking, I would like you to give as much detail as you can in your answers so that we can really understand what it is that you are saying and so that anybody else listening to this interview in the future can really understand what it is that you're saying and we can do justice to what you're telling us. Now, as I say, you're here on suspicion of murdering her. We believe she may be dead and that may be at your hand. So, did you kill her? So, I'm not clear at the moment, Ben, whether you're just trying to think of an answer or whether you've decided not to answer the question." Over the next 7 hours, he was interviewed by investigators. Leckham was silent and refused to answer any question put to him. During a search of the house, a shovel was found in the garden shed that appeared to be brand new. They needed to find Sarah, ascertain the cause of death, and prove that this had been done deliberately by Ben Leckham. Specialists from the fire service and marine units from all over the country were drafted into the extensive searches to try and find her. including part of the Thames and land near the Blue Water Shopping Center. So Joe, what's the latest from today? Yeah. Thanks Andy. Well, the latest today is that dozens of police officers have been searching this area here in Mounts Road. In Green Hive, just a couple of minutes from Blue Water, as you just said. Now, you might be unable to see, but the officers were searching this woodland area behind me to look for any more clues into her disappearance. And they were also searching, as you said, near the Blue Water Shopping Center in the surrounding areas there. Roads were closed off while searches were conducted, and 1,400 sites were searched, but none led to Sarah's body. In spite of this and on the basis of the case that had been built on December 28, 2018, Ben Leckham was charged with the murder of Sarah Well Green. At Woolwich Crown Court, the trial of Ben Leckham would begin. Prosecutor Alex Morgan QC would say in a documentary about the case. Having a trial with no body presents unique challenges. One of the key moments for the prosecution was revealing a conversation that Ben had had with police several days before his arrest. They had requested his phone. He signed the consent form, but then refused to give consent for deleted data to be retrieved. He told them that he would give it to them the next day at the station because it was late and he wanted to go to bed. But CCTV revealed that Ben hadn't gone to bed. His car was spotted parked by the River Thames late at night trying to get rid of something. Something police believe was his mobile phone. Following Sarah going missing, Leckham was captured on a CCTV camera in a shop, buying a new phone in the exact same make that he put his old SIM card into. DCI Beasley said another element of the case that they argued was evidence of planning was the hours in between him leaving the address and coming home, indicating he had already chosen the deposition site for Sarah's body. When it came to the shovel that had been found during the search, the defense argued that it was there for his mother so she could look after the flowers that were in front of the house. But the flowers at the home did not require such a big shovel, adding to the theory that it had been potentially used to dig a grave. Alison Morgan QC from the prosecution said that the idea he had bought what she referred to as a gravedigger shovel as a present for his mother was complete nonsense. Over the course of the trial, more information would be revealed that painted a clearer picture of Ben and Sarah's relationship. When she arrived home from work on the 9th of October, she told Ben that she was planning to buy his share of the house, as her new job would leave her in a financial situation where that was feasible. This meant that in more ways than one, Ben Lomé was losing control. And if she were to leave him for good and sell the house, he would have been left with virtually nothing. The judge, jury, counsel, court clerk, and ushers were given a police escort to the family home to help them contextualize the evidence and see the inner workings of the home, including the intricate CCTV system. Defense barrister Rebecca Trower QC concluded their case by saying, "What I ask of you is a lot less than what the prosecution asked. They are asking you to convict a 39-year-old man with no criminal convictions, not even cautions, of the carefully planned murder of the mother of his children. That is a big ask." After 30 days of the trial, it was time for the jury to deliberate. They would soon return their verdict. On the 28th of October, 2019, Ben Lomé was found guilty of the murder of Sarah Well Green. He received life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years. Today, outside court, there were embraces. Her mother, in the brown coat here, had just heard that her killer would not be released for decades. Ben Lomé showed no remorse or an ounce of emotion as he was sentenced to life in prison today for the murder of his ex-partner, Sarah Well Green. He will serve a minimum of 27 years behind bars for killing the mum of 5 at the home they shared in New Ash Green, and won't be released until he's at least 66 years old. After the trial, her eldest son, Louis, speaking on behalf of the family, said he hopes he's never released until he admits where her body is. Today, as far as the law is concerned, justice has been served for Sarah. We hope he will never be released unless he admits his guilt and reveals the location of her grave. To date, he has shown no remorse or care for either Sarah or his own children. Because Ben Lomé has refused to reveal the location of Sarah's body, we, her family, have been unable to mourn Sarah's passing or lay her to rest in peace. He has never revealed what happened to Sarah or where she is. Should he continue to refuse to divulge any information, it could mean he remains in prison for a longer time under Helen's Law. Helen's Law, named after murder victim Helen McCord, makes killers ineligible for parole if they do not tell police where they've hidden the body of a victim. This followed the tireless campaigning of Marie McCord, mother of Helen, a 22-year-old insurance clerk who was murdered in 1988. Her murderer, Ian Sims, has never revealed her body's location. The petition calling for Helen's Law had gained more than 600,000 signatures and high government support. In November 2020, Helen's Law received royal assent. Under the law, killers could still be released if no longer deemed a risk to the public, even if they refuse to disclose information. But the parole board will be legally required to consider whether they have cooperated with inquiries as part of their assessment. One of Sarah's elder sons said Sarah's ex-husband also spoke about him wanting her body to be found. In the year that followed her disappearance, nearly 3,000 potential deposition sites have been identified. But none have led to Sarah. The community in New Ash Green has never given up on their search for Sarah Well Green. They have said they will never stop their search for her, and a Facebook page called Search for Sarah Well Green was set up too. For those who knew and loved Sarah, the agony of not knowing where she is and what happened to her is devastating. It is the hope of Sarah's family that he will one day reveal her whereabouts so that she can finally be brought home and laid to rest. Story 2. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to show you who I am. Oh, I'm a monster. Oh, can you see me smiling at you? Look at this beautiful face. This cute, innocent, sweet, and shy thing. Whoa, that's me, man. I feel it in my head. Now I'm thinking about if one day she'll ever see this. At 7:30 a.m., the housing manager of the apartment complex smelled a foul stench emanating from apartment A. They also saw something seeping down the sides of the walls under the apartment. Sue Courtourtney, a crime scene investigator, was called to the scene. She immediately called for backup. As officers entered the apartment, they were met with a disturbing scene. The badly decomposing body of a man was slumped on the floor. His face had been painted. As Sue Courtourtney entered the apartment, she began to take photographs of the scene. Due to the state of decomposition, it was clear that he had been dead for several days, dying from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. His cause of death was not immediately released by the Broward Medical Examiner's Office, due to the pending investigation. A video camera was set up pointing in his direction with the same paint on the eyepiece. There was writing on the walls and one part that read, "The best of me." Also in the apartment was a collection of videotapes. The police began to troll through them. Items and mess were strewn all over the apartment. The tape in the video recorder was titled "Last Day." Officers wound the tape back to the beginning and would soon realize that they were in a race against time to stop a murder plot from being carried out. On the 14th of January, 1975, Ricardo Lopez was born in Uruguay. The youngest of 3 children, he had 2 older brothers who were much older than him. His family would later move to Georgia in the United States. He was adored by his mother, who had given birth to him when she was nearly 40. He would later say that she had a special attachment to him. According to family members, Lopez was an introverted person but did have good relationships with them. He had Klinefelter syndrome, a chromosomal disorder characterized by symptoms including hypergonism and issues with fertility. He also had gynecomastia, which causes the breast tissue to become large, something he would become extremely unhappy and insecure about. His friendship circle was small and he had no female friends or romantic relationships with women. He was socially awkward and had often felt that he wasn't good enough. These feelings of being inferior carried on as he got older. He abandoned plans to become an artist. He was worried he wouldn't get into art school and so decided against the idea altogether. He worked on and off in a pest control business run by his brother in order to earn some money. By the time he was 17 years old, he was a recluse. He became obsessed with celebrities as a means of escape. A diary he would later write would refer to a crush he had developed on actress Geena Davis after watching her in Thelma and Louise, saying at one point he had watched it more times than Hinckley had watched Taxi Driver. This referred to John Hinckley Jr., who had become obsessed with actress Jodie Foster after seeing her performance in Taxi Driver. In an alleged bid to gain her attention on March 30, 1981 at 2:27 p.m., John Hinckley Jr. shot President Ronald Reagan in a failed assassination attempt. Ricardo Lopez's interest in Geena Davis would soon evaporate after he learned that she was in a relationship. In 1993, when he was 18 years old, Lopez's life would change forever. What would begin as what he referred to as a muse would soon turn into a deadly obsession. The music video for a song, Human Behavior, was playing on the television. Lopez became transfixed by the face of the brunette singer. The song was from the album debut by Icelandic sensation Björk. He began to find as much information on her as he could and would fill his apartment with posters of her. He found her address through a celebrity service where one could pay money in exchange for information. He sent various letters to Björk and knew all the details of her life and career. His diary would refer to him feeling ignored as the days passed without a response from Björk. He kept a diary during this time. In his diary, he spoke of wanting to go back in time so he could be friends with her when she was a child, saying his fixation with her resulted in feelings of euphoria. However, his infatuation with her was not a sexual one. He would write in his diary, "I couldn't have sex with Björk because I love her." His diary would provide further insight into his state of mind as his stalking of Björk took over his life. it would be over 800 pages with references being made to murder, suicide, and him being inadequate. He would write about his issues with his body and how he looked, coupled with him not finding a girlfriend, and his fixation with bookwork. In 1996, Lopez read an article about bookwork in Entertainment Weekly, saying she was now in a relationship with the music star Goldie. Lopez was living by himself in Florida at this time, and the article would enrage him. "Hello, my name is Ricardo Lopez." As a birthday gift to himself, he decided to buy a video camera. He then began to record a video diary, replacing his written one. His diary would span multiple hours, filling 11 tapes. "Hello, my name is Ricardo Lopez. It is January 14, 1996. Today is my birthday. I'm 21 now. Yesterday I purchased this camera. Today I purchased a tripod, and I will begin the documentation of my life, of my art, and of my plans. Okay. Comfort is what I seek in speaking to you. Something with I don't know. Something that makes me feel better. For a long time, I've been speaking into the mirror and being my own psychologist. Sort of whatever. It's a release as many times as my art is, or would like to think that my art is. You are a camera. I am Ricardo. We are both the same now. You are a living part of my brain, which is simultaneously perhaps doing a better job of it remembering these events which are going to unfold." He talks about his extensive diaries he had written over the past few years. This right here, since August 26, 1993, has been the documentation. I like to use the word documentary. I like that word better. Documentary of my life. 803 pages, and you know it's something. It's certainly something. Before long, he talked about his dangerous fixation. Bork has been an incredible part of my mind since '93, since I first saw it. I started with a crush and ended up with an obsession, which I'm not embarrassed to admit now. It's an obsession. It sort of has calmed down times. You know, I've been okay with it. Other times, it's flared up. January 2nd, I believe, I went to Borders. I purchased a magazine. A couple of magazines, and I got enthusiastic about sending for more information about her and all that stuff, you know, because I did for a while. Then I stopped. And now again, you know, I sent, let me show you. See? All these? These are money order receipts I sent for information, all sorts of information where she lives. You know, again, to different things, autographs, posters. There's about as much information as I can get about her. And one of which was in a magazine spin, where I learned to my surprise and quite happily that there was a hotline of concert dates, and lo and behold, Bork was on there. You know, I had her address, and you know, he spoke of his rage about her relationship with Goldie that he had read about. His idea of her purity had been important to him, and his sense of betrayal and disgust that she was in a relationship, and in a relationship with a black man, enraged him. He would write about what he referred to as a deliciously sadistic plan to inflict his pain on her. You believe that? Yes. Unacceptable. Maybe he's a nice guy. Maybe he's not a nice guy. Maybe he's an opportunist, but he's a that's it. I don't give a __ about him. So, babe, whose fault is that? It's right. That's her fault. And that's completely Unacceptable to me. And I'm just going to have to kill her. She's going to die for what she did. She's going to die. After he had decided he was going to kill the woman whom he believed had betrayed him, he used his video diary to detail how he would do it. I'm going to send a package. A package will be sent to her when she is there in London. Plus, I know that she's not touring. She's in her house. Whatever. Recording. Perfect. Okay. She's going to receive the package. Boom. His video showed the plans he had drawn up to murder Bork with a hypodermic needle. Those two hypodermic needles are going to poke her thumbs, thus introducing into her bloodstream HIV-contaminated blood. I'm not going to go to prison. I'm going to have to kill myself. There's going to be a tape, an audio cassette. Let me just show you a little picture. The extensive planning and other booby traps he intended to send her were also documented in his video diary. Lopez also spoke about his desperation to avoid being detected should his plan succeed. I have to have this so far away from me. Because if I'm even a suspect and have no evidence, the day that they ask me in for questioning is the day I die. Because I will not make it through the questioning, I will break like a paper-thin crystal glass. I sent her artwork. Strange as fog, possibly menacing artwork. Left my name, left my address, left my telephone number. You know, wanted her to write to me. That wasn't a mistake. I had to do that. But it puts me at a severe disadvantage. If it wasn't for that, there's no way in the world that they could catch me. There's no way. Even though he had never gone to one of her concerts or attempted to physically meet her, he had been keen to make contact through mail. His history of sending excessive letters to Bork was also a subject of his video diary. This has got to be well thought of. Well thought of. I've got to make sure I get her, not anybody else. There's not much I can do about that, but I can make it enticing enough and forbidden enough to others to keep on pressing the buttons if it's not them. Every step of the way, it will be documented and she will pay. She killed me for that. She's going to die, that's for sure. Yep. And that's my goal. Kill her, scare her, traumatize her, and more than anything know of my existence. You know that's a good motivator to make these tapes for one day for her to see the real F***. Asterisking me. Why? Another reason why to kill her. Not another reason, but I can't really explain it, but to get her to be so interested in me. You know they should sit through 80 hours of footage to learn more about me. The man who completely changed her life and will end her life. I am the angel of death for her. His now visceral hatred of her and what he viewed as a betrayal was front and center. I want to be the biggest influence on her life. The person who the most influential, the most important person who changed her life more than anybody else, the guy who took her life. In his video diary, it documented his rapidly declining mental health and his detachment from the world around him. The extensive planning he was undertaking to kill Bork were all documented in his video diaries, showing his drawings and details about how he believed the FBI would track him down. Okay. What I'm going to show you is about as self-incriminating as it gets. So, this is me now. I'm going to send something. Okay. I'm going to travel to New York, more likely. Okay. Plant A. Seed of evidence. I'm going to go all the way to London. My package, it's not me. It's going to go to York. From there, she's going to contact the can you read that? The New Scotland Yard. From there, they're going to determine, first of all, that it was an American thing, so the FBI should be contacted. Okay. Now, pre-lead steps. This is what I think the FBI will try to do to stop me. As Lopez continued to fall deeper into his obsession, hours upon hours of tape were recorded, and more pages of notes were written. Notes about how he would avoid detection and how he thought an investigation into him would be conducted if this fails, you know, like if she doesn't get infected, you know. I'm going to tell her that I'm going to go after her, you know, finish the job and this and that and to, you know, let her know that I'm quite capable of doing such a task. His video diaries also showed his disorganized apartment and the environment he was living in. My tape is almost up. Here's a sculpture which I'm creating of New York. This is the first tape that I'm showing you. I'm almost running out of tape, but see, I live in a practical pig stack. This is my apartment. I'm a pig. My bed. My bed is leaning up against the wall. There's my infamous drawing table, book table. The prototypes he made were also featured in his video diaries, showing the planning and forethoughts he was putting into his plan. He spoke about religion and how he planned to die before Armageddon occurred, and again referred to his hatred of black people. Conversations he had had with his brother and his family dynamics were also mentioned. I've also mentioned the fact of buying a gun, getting a load of guns, and that's when he got really scared. And he even called my parents in Uruguay, called my brother in Atlanta. See, I have a very loving family, you know, unlike many people. And I really don't appreciate it that much because I guess since I have it, my father and my mother and everybody there, they've always been there for me. But I'm just not right. I'm perfectly sane. I know exactly what's right and wrong. My mother has a love for me that it's truly bewildering. I mean, of course, every mother loves their son, but it's, you know, since I was born the latest, you know, I was like the niño de la, as they say in Spanish. I was, you know, a child born. I mean, I was born when my mother was almost 40. You know, my older brother being, you know, 39 years old and George being 30. What is he, 35 and I'm 21? So, it's like a big age difference. And so, it's like I was a child. You know, that wasn't expected. And so, she has a special attachment. I'm just going to have to kill her. He depicts a thick hollowed-out book wired up with a device appearing to be a bomb. Diagrams found in his apartment appear to be blueprints for the bomb, but the bomb is not there. The police evacuate a radius of 1 block around the apartment while they try desperately to find the device. After 4 hours of searching, Broward Sheriff's Office bomb and arson unit say that the area is safe. Although they have found what they call questionable materials, the device isn't there. They don't know where the bomb is or who it's intended for. But 11 minutes into the tape, it all starts to become clear. The bomb is intended for Bork. It is designed so that when she opens it, acid is sprayed all over her face, with Lopez showing himself practicing with an unknown substance. He would later change it to sulfuric acid after deciding that hydrochloric was not strong enough. In order to get the bomb to Bookwork, he wrote a fake letter from Elektra, the record company. The letter said that the parcel was an old book being made into a film, and the director and casting director wanted her to be involved. Lopez's hope was that she would be intrigued, open the book, the bomb would go off, and spray sulfuric acid in her face. In the morning, Lopez filmed his video diary. He planned to take the parcel to the post office, going armed so that if anything went wrong, he would begin shooting. 10:12 a.m. Lopez sits down in front of the camera and starts to shave his head. 11:19 a.m. He begins to paint his face. At 2:38 p.m., the building manager leaves. He says, "I've got a gun. I just want to say my last words. F***K the world. That's my last words. And F***Koruk. 12:30 p.m. At 2:46 p.m. Lopez says, "I'm definitely not drunk. I'm not depressed. I know exactly what I'm doing. It's cocked back and I'm ready to roll. This debt is for you, Bookwork. For you to see it and some compensation for the pain I have caused you. Everything in my life that I have fantasized about, I have accomplished." At 2:49 p.m. Ricardo Lopez says, "This is the last song. After this, I'm dead." The tape then continues to roll as Bookwork's music plays through the apartment. Using a .38 caliber pistol, Ricardo Lopez calmly says, "This is for you." Takes several deep breaths and then takes his own life. After officers watch the tape, they come to a horrifying realization. The bomb has been mailed 4 days ago, and it only takes 5 days to reach London. They have 24 hours to find the bomb, intercept it, and save Bork. Hollywood police contact the Metropolitan Police Force in London to tell them that a bomb has been sent to the UK. Bork was in London finalizing her latest album, Homogenic. Totally unaware of the threat to her life or even of Ricardo Lopez's existence. New Scotland Yard police set up a secret mail detection system to trace and track packages. Time is running out for them to find the bomb before it gets to Bookwork's house. Before long, they finally get a hit. The parcel is in South London on its way to be delivered to Bookwork. Police have never revealed how they were able to find the package, but it was intercepted, taken to a secure site, and safely detonated. Her spokesman gave a statement following the detonation of the device. He said that they had reason to believe that there might be some parcel sent to Bookwork and that they were going to screen it and not to worry because they had a system designed to deal with it. They dealt with it in their time-honored way and apparently acid was sprayed in all directions. So, it was a very nasty device. Bork was incredibly shaken and distressed by the incident and gave a statement in London. "I just find it very sad that people get that kind of statement. I'm very upset obviously." "How have you been?" "Well, you know, it's just kind of a very sad thing." "Well, I'm worried about my son." "I'll be fine. I'm always fine." She left London and headed to Spain before returning to her home of Iceland. She also sent flowers to his family to express her sympathies. "The only thing I've ever fantasized about, if anything, was just bringing her pleasure to satisfy her need. Ricardo Lopez had no previous criminal record. He had no history of violence. His family did know about his fascination with pork, but say they didn't know the dangerous nature of his obsession. The psychiatrist who had treated Lopez in the months before his suicide said that he did not appear to be a dangerous man. Yet, he developed an insidious plot to destroy or end the life of the woman he had become infatuated with, a woman who didn't even know he existed. With the rise of social media, reality television, and platforms like YouTube, we now have insight and access to people that we have never had before. Parasocial relationships means that consumers of media can come to view people in the public eye as friends despite in most cases having never even met them. With the rise of things like vlogging and the information now available, it's easy to think that we know these people and it's easy to be drawn into their lives. It's terrifying to think that Ricardo Lopez was able to gain such information about bookwork and was so close to committing such a violent act prior to the age of social media or mainstream use of the internet as we know it today. Ricardo Lopez thankfully never succeeded in his plan to destroy or end Bork's life. He was just 21 years old when he took his own life in his apartment. Thanks to the quick-thinking Hollywood police and the tenacity of New Scotland Yard, Bjork's life was saved. If that parcel had been delivered, one can only imagine the destruction and devastation it would have caused. Story 3. Now we're in Montana, the largest landlocked state in the USA. Montana boasts gorgeous views, rocky mountains, tranquil lakes, and breathtaking hiking routes. And for these reasons, among many, it is a hugely popular and busy tourist area, especially around the summer months. 2. People that called Montana home was 21-year-old Jordan Lindgren and 24-year-old Cody Johnson. Cody was born in San Jose, California, and grew up with his mother, Sherry, after his parents divorced. Cody was her only child, and the pair were extremely close. Sherry soon decided she wanted to move out of California completely, and the pair started a new life in Montana. Friends said Cody just loved to make people laugh. He was over the top and always happy to play the class clown to cheer people up. He loved everything outdoors, fishing, shooting, and taking long walks. And one of his biggest passions was doing up cars and racing them with his friends. After school, the car-loving Cody got a job making custom-muled vehicles, and naturally, he loved it. His boss was his close friend, Cameron, and his career was flourishing. He told people, however, that he felt something was missing. He wanted to settle down, meet someone, and raise a family in Montana. His single life would soon change when in 2011, Cody met Jordan Graham. Jordan was quite shy, more reserved, and introverted than Cody, only opening up if she was really comfortable around someone. When she did, people said she shared the same sense of humor as Cody, and the pair seemed a great match. Jordan also shared his love of the outdoors and traveling, and they spent a lot of time hiking and touring scenic routes in the area. One of the couple's favorite places to visit was the over 700 m of trails that made up the famous Glacier National Park. Jordan also loved children, often helping to babysit her friends' kids. And she too was keen to have children of her own. Jordan came from a religious household and spoke a lot about how strict this could be. There were a lot of rules, one of which was no sex before marriage. Cody told people he was infatuated with Jordan, and before long, he would be attending church with her. Friends and family said their relationship appeared to be going from strength to strength. Cody was beside and told his mother he had found the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. So, after a year of dating, in December 2012, when Jordan made a very special announcement on social media, no one was surprised. After 6 months of planning, on June 29, 2013, Jordan and Cody were married. The wedding seemed to reflect the young couple perfectly. A magical ceremony held outdoors with the pair even writing their own song for them to have for their first dance. Jordan sobbed uncontrollably as she walked down the aisle and wasn't really making eye contact with Cody, looking at the ground a lot instead. But for someone who was more introverted, this wasn't a surprise. Cody, however, was beaming. There were plenty of gushing speeches about the couple. It was a beautiful event for them both. After the big day was over, the couple moved into their first home and opted for doing this up and decorating with their time off rather than traveling anywhere together for their honeymoon. Cody had booked a week off work and was due back on the 8th of July, Sunday, July 7, 2013. Cody had made plans with his father-in-law, Stephen, to go kayaking that day, but he later contacted him and cancelled the plans, saying Jordan had a surprise for him. Another friend of Cody's also said he had called off a round of golf for the exact same reason. Cody and Jordan then went to an afternoon church service before going to the lake and then heading back to church. After this, they had a late dinner at Dairy Queen with some friends before leaving together. July 8, 6 a.m. Cody's week off had come to an end, and he was due to start work early, but the usually prompt and hard-working Cody failed to show up. Because of how out of character this was, Cody's boss, Cameron, decided to go to the couple's house and panicked. He forced his way inside. There was no one there, and there was no sign of a break-in or anything being overtly or obviously wrong. Nothing inside was broken or smashed, and nothing seemed to be missing. He then went into the garage to see if Cody's car was there. He found Cody's phone. Just the same as most people, Cody was never without his phone, and Cameron quickly filed a missing persons report. The first person detectives needed a statement from was Cody's wife. Jordan told officers that on the way back from Dairy Queen, Cody had answered the phone and ended up having a 30-minute conversation. She didn't know who was on the end of the phone, but Cody seemed visibly agitated. When they pulled up to the house, Jordan realized her phone was about to die and she had left her charger at work. She got back in the car and headed to her workplace, leaving Cody in the garage. She then got a text from Cody saying he was going to take a drive with someone. She arrived back at the house to see him leaving in a dark-colored car that had Washington state license plates, but Jordan said this wasn't unusual. As everyone knew, Cody loved cars, and she said he would often take off with a new group of friends to race, sometimes very late into the evening. Jordan said she hadn't wanted to report him missing in case he came back and was angry at her for overreacting. Cody and Jordan's friends quickly rallied around and started trying to access his social media accounts, hoping to work out where he might have gone. Authorities obtained Cody's call logs and discovered that a Washington number had made a call to Cody around the time Jordan had said. Given the fact that Jordan remembered seeing Washington license plates, this was a good lead. The number was linked to a man named Jose. Jose told police he ran Cody to talk to him about some tools he had borrowed from him. There was nothing unusual about the conversation, and nothing Jose could remember as being off about Cody at the time. Jose was cleared thanks to a strong alibi, and police concluded, although strange especially given the Washington license plates, it was simply just an odd coincidence. The search for Cody began to widen. People were out all hours of the day and night, and his friends and family were trying everything they could think of to find him. It had now been 3 days since Cody was last seen, and police weren't getting any further. Jordan was in and out of the station answering various questions. Questions which weren't being met with the same answers twice: what's going on as far as where he might have gone or who he might be with. I got a message saying that he was going to go for a ride with some of his out-of-town buddies that were visiting. I have no idea who they were, but he always told me this one thing. When his friends came to visit, he would take them to Glacier Park. You guys weren't having any kind of argument? No, I don't know anything more, any whereabouts or anything. I'm getting some inconsistencies in what you're telling me with other information that I've already gathered. Okay. And I've spoke to a few people, and it's important that I know that you're telling me the truth on things. How can I know what I know? Well, and I understand that, okay. But I think that there's more. One day, Jordan arrived back at the police station with her mother, armed with an email she had just received. I got an email this morning from some guy outside. It was Tony. The email was from someone calling themselves Carman Tony. It was short and blunt. It read, "Hi Jordan, my name is Tony. There is no bother in looking for Cody anymore. He is gone. Call off the search." The email went on to say that Cody went off with some friends for a hike that night and had fallen off the cliff. Everyone was shaken, and they hoped it was either not true, or if true, Cody could still be saved. "I just want to go home." Jordan said she did in fact know a Tony-esque that worked with Cody. Authorities found him and asked him to come in for an interview. Tony hadn't seen or spoken to Cody in a while, and he had never used an email linked with Carman Tony. He was happy to hand over his phone and computer records, and with this police were back at square one again. They subpoenaed Google in regards to the email as well as Cody and Jordan's phones to gather any data. Given the contents of the email pointing towards Cody falling off the cliff, Jordan gathered up her own search party and they headed up into the rocky terrain of Glacier National Park. Some of the roads on the drive up were narrow, winding, and given the span of the park, people knew they could be searching for weeks, if he was even there. A day later, they went back again, but this time Jordan seemed to be on a mission. They drove past many roads and cliff edges, any of which Cody could have been on or near, and carried on up, getting higher and higher. Jordan was telling people she wanted to go to a specific spot. She told her friends that it was a place he had wanted to see before he died, and the Holy Spirit was leading her there. At one point, Jordan abruptly stopped the car. She leapt out near what is called the Loop Trail. Off of the track, there was a steep drop down past many sharp rocks and trees. It was undoubtedly treacherous as the drop was a terrifying 300 feet. Despite this, Jordan climbed over the wall and headed for the edge. She leaned over and shouted to everyone behind that she could see someone at the bottom in the water. She then started shouting over and over that she knew it was Cody. The search party alerted the park rangers, but due to the time of night and how dangerous it was to try and get down, they had to wait until morning. At 8 a.m. on July 12, the search for Cody Johnson came to a tragic end. On the way down the cliff, using ropes tied to trees, they found a blue trainer that matched the one Cody was wearing the day he went missing. They finally reached the bottom, and lying face down in the shallow water near the waterfall was Cody Johnson. Near to his body was a small piece of black cloth, and he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. As news began to spread that he had been found, his friends and family couldn't fathom why on earth he would have been up there at night in the first place. His friend Eddie said even though Cody loved seeing the sights and going on long walks up there, he wouldn't have ever steered off the path and climbed over the walls in the dark. Cody wasn't actually very good with heights. He never went too high up and always stuck to the lower level tourist routes with retaining walls around them. Eddie said once he couldn't get up a ladder to fit a new light bulb for his mother because of the height. Shortly after Cody was found, Jordan posted a photo on Instagram from their wedding day. The caption read, "Miss you so much, Cody. Not a day will go by where I don't think about you. You will live on in my heart forever. I know you're in a better place now looking down on me. You're my angel. Love you with all my heart and soul. See you again one day." It had now been 2 weeks and police were still searching for answers regarding the mystery email. While they did this, Cody was laid to rest. At his funeral, Jordan sat through most of it on her phone, showing no emotion. It could have been her way of processing and compartmentalizing the situation, but her maid of honor and best friend, Kimberly, thought this was just too strange. After this, Kimberly promptly walked into the police station and started to shine a whole new light on the investigation. She asked to talk to officers about some interesting texts she had gotten off of Jordan in the weeks leading up to and just after the wedding. Despite their perfect nuptials, she recalled many a conversation with Jordan about how she seemed far more excited about planning the wedding rather than the thought of being married to Cody, more excited to be a bride than a wife. Others said that Cody, put simply, was always far more in love with Jordan than she ever was with him. Kimberly recounted a couple of times Jordan had asked her if she thought she was making the right decision. Other people would back this up and say Jordan was very nervous about the wedding night and wondered if she was making a mistake in committing to Cody. The night after the wedding, Jordan texts Kimberly saying, "I don't know if all this was the right thing to do. So much happened last night. I just don't know." Kimberly replied, "Last night at the wedding or last night in the room?" Jordan said, "Being married and after the wedding." "What happened after?" Kimberly asked. "I'd rather talk about what happened, not text about it." But as the days progressed, the texts continued using the "my period started" spiel tonight. "I freaking hope it works because if I'm forced to do something, I'm going to freak out." On the night of July 7th, as the pair were leaving Dairy Queen after dinner, Kimberly received another text from Jordan. This time saying she wanted to talk to Cody about how she was really feeling. Kimberly said she would send Positivity and prayers to them both. And just before 9 p.m., Jordan replied and said, "But dead serious. If you don't hear from me at all again tonight, something happened." Later that night, Jordan would turn up on Kimberly's doorstep, telling her the conversation hadn't gone down well. She said Cody got really angry, and she ended up leaving the house to go to her brother's. This, along with her seemingly knowing exactly where to find Cody, and the comments she had made about him wanting to see that place before he died, as well as her not being the one to report him missing, was all too odd. Kimberly said it was a sickening feeling, but she knew in her gut that Jordan was somehow responsible for Cody's death. She just didn't know how or why. Detectives already had their suspicions given how many times her stories had changed, and Kimberly's proof of text messages only solidified their thoughts. After this, the IP address from the email came back. It actually pointed towards the email being set up and used in her stepfather's home. And despite Jordan saying they were both separate the night as he had driven off, phone records confirmed this was a lie. Both phones were together in Glacier National Park at 9:17 p.m. Using this time frame, they managed to gather CCTV to the entrance of the park, which showed Cody's car and both of them inside. Police were no longer looking at the elusive carman Tony. They were now looking straight at Jordan Graham. Jordan was asked to come into the station and tell them the full truth about what had happened that night. She eventually broke down and told them she had started to talk to Cody about how she felt, and it escalated into an argument. Cody said if this was how she felt, they should annul the marriage. Jordan, however, was worried about her reputation if they divorced a mere 8 days after the wedding. How and why this came to be remains unclear, but they both got in the car and drove to the park, where they set off on a trail. At one point, Jordan even mentioned a blindfold. She said they both walked over a bridge and then climbed over the retaining wall where the argument continued. There was no planning on your part to kill Cody? No. Okay. You hadn't planned that until this whole thing just kind of happened in the heat of the emotion and the passion of that situation. So, he would have fallen face first down the hill. Why did you continue to turn around and then push him off? I think it's because the emotions were running so high. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was every emotion I could ever think of all at once. And I've never felt like that before. I've never experienced that kind of emotion. What did you personally feel responsible for? For him, especially when he was falling. Despite her claiming it to be in the heat of the moment and essentially an accident, officers weren't convinced. Why wouldn't she have run for help rather than running to her stepfather's computer to fake an email? Why would Cody have climbed over the edge in the first place when he was afraid of going near the cliff edge? Even for someone that wasn't afraid of heights, to go over a safety wall in the pitch black above a 300 feet drop wearing a blindfold seems an inconceivable thought. The latest on that newlywed accused of killing her husband just 8 days after the wedding by pushing him off a cliff. Jordan Lynn Graham has now been officially charged with murder and is expected to be arraigned in court later today. A federal judge ordered her release, placing her under home detention and mandating she undergo a mental health evaluation. Johnson's friends and family say they're relieved she's finally been charged. It's going in the right direction and justice will be served, but at the end of the day, we're still missing a huge part of our lives. Jordan Lynn Graham was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and making false statements, but this was soon upped. Prosecutors originally charged Montana newlywed Jordan Graham with second-degree murder for pushing her husband Cody Johnson off this cliff in Glacier National Park, but now a grand jury has added a charge of premeditated first-degree murder. Levi and Latani Blazadell have known Graham since childhood. Levi introduced the couple. She was crying hysterically before she even got to the altar. There was no joy that she was about to get married. After her husband's death, the Blazdells say they noticed more strange behavior from the widowed bride. Whenever I saw her, she was just herself. Nothing happened. No emotion, nothing. It was her same old life, so we always had that little bit in the back of our minds saying, you know, I think she may be involved. As the trial began, her defense team went straight in fighting for a second-degree murder conviction, claiming it was an accident in the midst of a heated argument. But the prosecution felt strongly that this was far more than an accident. They said the fact she had told him she had a surprise for him and he was found near something that may have been used as a blindfold showed this was very much premeditated. This, along with the phone records, the fake email, the failure to alert anyone or report him missing, and the lack of emotion after the fact added more to their case that she didn't care about what she had done, had planned it, and hoped to pin it on someone else. Jordan Graham walked into what would be a damaging second day for her defense in her murder trial. Prosecutors played video of police interviews where the jury saw and heard Graham lying to police. Sergeant Chad Zimmerman says on video to Graham, "I'm getting the feeling you're not being 100% honest with me." Graham also lied to her own 16-year-old brother. He testified that Graham brought him to the cliff to discover Johnson's body. The teenage boy sobbed, saying she told one lie, was asked to tell the truth. She said it again. She had to keep adding more lies to cover it up. Graham even lied to her best friend and matron of honor, Kim Martinez. She testified that before Johnson's death, Graham claimed her new husband would grab her and had a terrible temper. That was hard to hear for Johnson's friends who call it another lie. Just he's a great friend of mine, just a really good guy. Just a tragic situation that we're in right now. On December 12, 2013, just 4 days after her trial began, Jordan's defense team made an announcement. Jordan Graham entered court a free woman. She left today in handcuffs. In a stunning about-face, the 22-year-old newlywed changed her plea for second-degree murder to guilty. Graham stood before the judge and said this was the truth about what really happened at the cliff at Glacier National Park. "I wasn't thinking of where we were," Graham told the judge. "It was a reckless act. I just pushed." Just as the lawyers were about to present closing arguments, the defense says they got offered a deal from the prosecution. They would drop the charges of first-degree murder and lying to federal authorities if Graham agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. "All I can say is that the ultimate plea that was entered was Ms. Graham's choice." When Graham uttered the word guilty, her former mother-in-law wept. Her parents remained silent, leaving the courthouse and their daughter in the custody of U.S. Marshals. Jordan Graham's plea deal gave her 30 years in federal prison with no chance of parole any earlier. In exchange for her plea, prosecutors agreed to drop the charge of premeditated first-degree murder, as well as one count of making a false statement to authorities. After her sentencing, the judge said, "There's only one person in this room that knows what happened, and I don't think she's been entirely truthful." Jordan Graham wants to withdraw her guilty plea. Jordan filed a motion to withdraw her plea on March 26, 2014, but this motion was denied. For those that Cody left behind, they still struggle with how on earth things got to such a point. They say as broken-hearted as he would have been to end the marriage, he would have absolutely walked away if it meant she was happy. Because her being happy was the most important thing to him. His affectionate, animated, and vivacious personality is missed dearly by everyone that knew and loved him. For Sherry, the pain of losing her only child and still never knowing why haunts her. Cody's best friend said, "He did so much for everybody. I just didn't realize how much he did for me until he was gone." Story 4. 24-year-old Annie Lilly was born in San Jose, California, and grew up in a big family. Described by those that knew her as conscientious, polite, and friendly to everyone she met with a lot of tenacity and a great sense of humor. From a young age, she was known as an exceptional student. She was the valedictorian of her graduating high school class, and her classmates voted her the most likely to be the next Einstein. Annie earned $160,000 in scholarships and went on to obtain her undergraduate degree in cell development biology from the University of Rochester. It was here she met Jonathan Roski. The young couple were inseparable from the get-go. Annie said he was her best friend, and before long, Jonathan asked her to marry him. September 13, 2009 was set as the big day, and the wedding plans quickly got underway. After all those years of very intense and hard work, Annie was accepted into the prestigious Ivy League school, Yale University, hoping to earn her doctorate in pharmacology. She was always hands-on within her campus, getting involved in various extracurricular activities. She even wrote an article about campus safety titled "Crime and Safety in New Haven" for Yale Medical School's B magazine. Jonathan and Annie were living 76 miles apart at the time. Jonathan was at Columbia University working on his own doctorate, and this only made their reunion for the wedding on the 13th even more special. September 7, 2009, Annie was now in her final year at Yale. It was 5 days until the wedding, and it was safe to say Annie was as busy as ever. She was definitely feeling the stress of everything and called her friend Jennifer for some friendly words of encouragement. Jennifer said Annie asked if she thought they were too young to get married, but knowing this was normal nerves combined with the stress of Yale, Jennifer said she and Jonathan were absolutely making the right decision. Annie thanked her friend for telling her what she needed to hear, hung up, and carried on with her day. September 8, 2009. Annie still had lots of work to do around the campus before she set off to Long Island. She left her apartment that morning and took the Yale Transit to her office located on campus. She then walked to her lab where she would conduct most of her research, and this was about a minute away at 10 Amistad Street, room G13. The day on campus soon drew to a close. Students were leaving to head home and various buildings were locking up. Annie's roommates had been expecting her home hours ago, but she was nowhere to be seen. It got to 9 p.m. and with no one able to get hold of her roommates called the New Haven Police Department and reported her missing. Her friend Jennifer said that Annie always made sure she was safe. She didn't walk around at night by herself, and if she ever had to work late, she would make sure someone would come and pick her up or walk home with her. So, the fact that no one had received a call from her that day was very concerning. Police went to Annie's office where they found her wallet, keys, purse, and phone, but there were no signs of a struggle inside. Her belongings still being in there indicated she had likely left that morning with the intention of returning to her office fairly soon after. None of her credit or debit cards had been used, and her phone had no activity on it since she left it in the office. Her Yale ID card seemed to be the only thing from her purse that went with her that morning, and it had been used to get into the labs. CCTV confirmed it was Annie using her own ID card, and the footage captured her walking into 10 Amistad Street at around 10 a.m. She was carrying something that can't really be made out, but it's assumed it was something to do with her research. Although CCTV can't always convey a full story, it didn't look like anything was wrong with Annie that morning. She wasn't running away from anyone, she didn't seem to be in a rush, and no one stopped to talk to her on the way in. By all accounts, it seemed like a very typical morning for her. Unfortunately, there was only one camera on the basement level where Annie's lab was located, and it didn't show her walking past or through the door at all. At 12:50 p.m. that day, a fire alarm sounded in the building, and everyone was evacuated. One of the lab technicians assigned to maintain room G13 was a man named Ray, and he came forward with information. He didn't attend Yale, but had worked there for a little while. He told authorities that he had clocked in at 7 a.m. and had seen Annie in G13. He then said he thought he had seen her leave the lab just before the fire alarm went off that afternoon. The footage continued to be looked at, and authorities went into the building to see if they could see anything. Every hallway room, cupboard, and outside bin were searched, but nothing was there. Although Ray said he remembered her leaving, they couldn't see anything on the 70 cameras around the area that confirmed this. Yale offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Annie's whereabouts. Her fiancé flew in from New York and her family traveled over from California to help with the search. Annie's odd disappearance quickly became big news. Reporters were all over the campus and over 100 law enforcement officers joined the search, too. Authorities weren't initially sure if they were dealing with an abduction or something even more sinister, but some believed Annie had maybe got cold feet about her wedding and run away. This was quickly refuted by her friends and family. However, Annie had been planning the wedding for over a year and hadn't ever shown any signs of changing her mind about it. One of her friends said she was doing weather patterns to make sure the weather would be perfect on her wedding day. She wanted everything to be perfect. Everything down to the table napkins to flowers. Annie was very, very excited about this day. Her disappearance just days before the wedding made no sense. With still nothing from Annie, a second search of the building was conducted. And this time, a closer look at room G13 uncovered a drop of blood on one of the shelving units. And in a back storage room, G22, some beads that were determined to have been part of Annie's necklace were also found on the floor. On September 12, after finding the blood, police started a more in-depth search of G13. Lifting up one of the ceiling tiles, they found a bloody sock and a single blue surgical glove. They then brought in luminol, which was used across the neighboring labs, including G22. More blood was found in there. There was also a distinctly terrible smell developing around the locker rooms and toilets near to G22. A smell that some of the officers knew all too well. Cadaver dogs were brought in to try and locate the source of it, and the whole building was declared a crime scene. In the heart of New Haven, Yale is one of the city's oldest institutions and one of the largest, with more than 20,000 students, faculty, and staff, and its own police force. But the mysterious and troubling disappearance of doctoral student Annie Lee, with intensive media coverage of the investigation, is most unwelcome publicity. In a series of emails, university officials urged the Yale community not to speak to reporters, who can be very aggressive in situations like this where there are more questions than answers. Instead of us thinking of an Ivy League institution and an excellent education, we're thinking about crime and safety. 4 days after Lee's disappearance, the university's police chief sought to reassure the Yale community. The concern reaches far beyond the New Haven campus. His parents are calling in, checking, are you safe? Today, authorities continue to work in the laboratory where Annie Lee was last seen. Authorities reportedly have discovered bloody clothing in the ceiling of the building. Published reports say the clothing is not Lee's. Investigators are also pouring through garbage at a Hartford waste facility, looking for clues. The FBI continues to head up the investigation, numbering some 100 law enforcement authorities from Yale, the city of New Haven, and the state of Connecticut in an all-out effort to find Annie Lee. A day later, 5 p.m. on September 13, 2009, Annie Lee's decomposing body was found stuffed upside down inside a wall behind a metal utility panel in the basement of the building near the lockers and room of G22. September 13 was the day that Annie should have been walking down the aisle, and it was a tragic end to the 5-day search. The state medical examiner determined that Annie had died from traumatic asphyxiation by neck compression. She had a broken jaw and broken collarbone, and these injuries happened to her when she was alive. Further examination showed evidence of a sexual assault. Near to her body was her keycard and a blue surgical glove that paired with the one found under the ceiling tile. DNA samples were taken from her clothes and the area around her body and sent off to see if there was a hit on the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. A vigil was held for Annie on campus, and the loss of one of their own hung heavily over the staff and students. The school made grief counselors available for everyone, as well as a 24-hour helpline to anyone that needed it because of the access codes and IDs that people needed to get around the campus. Officer Joe Avery said they were not investigating this as a random act, instead believing it to be an inside job. He also said they didn't believe that any other students were involved and no one else was in any danger. This was reiterated by Robert Alpern, Dean of the Yale School of Medicine. He said, "I think that it suggests it was someone who could get into that space. It certainly would be extremely difficult for someone outside of Yale to get into that space. Not impossible, but extremely difficult." This only added to the foreboding feeling hanging over the already frightening campus. Students were scared about moving from class to class. Some said they were now traveling in big groups, even during the middle of the day. Others were turning down shifts at work. around the university for fear that whoever had done this was likely still walking around the campus, too. It wasn't long before a hit came back on the DNA. A match came back to a convicted felon named Kieran Robinson. This was not actually the clear-cut answer the police had been looking for. It was soon confirmed that Kieran had been shot and killed a long time before anything in Annie's case had ever happened, and his DNA being near her body could be easily explained. Kieran had actually been one of the people that helped with some construction on that particular building in the years before he died. And with no other matches on the Cody's database, police were still searching. More days would pass, and by this point, detectives had reviewed about 700 hours of video and interviewed over 150 people. There was one more person that had been on the detectives' radar since the start, but they didn't quite have enough to prove anything just yet. Using the keycard data, it was confirmed that only 2 other people had swiped into room G13 that day. One was a third-party contractor that was ruled out very quickly, and the other was 24-year-old Raymond Clark, the lab technician that told police he had seen Annie leaving the building that day. Little did Ray know, this one claim to police had put him straight in their EY line, as the cameras had already confirmed she absolutely did not leave. He had a reputation of being controlling and often quite nasty to any students. That left the lab dirty. Ray had in fact emailed Annie to complain about her leaving dirty mice cages behind after one of her studies. That being said, Yale had no record of disciplinary action taken against him at any point. Others, however, said Ray was pleasant and personable. Between 10:40 a.m. that morning until around 3:45 p.m., Ray had gone in and out of G13 and G22 a total of 55 times. And this was confirmed using his keycard and the cameras. They also captured Ray leaving when the fire alarm went off that afternoon and coming back in at 10:01 p.m. He walked around the basement area wearing slightly different scrubs before clocking off just before 4 p.m. At one point during the day, Ray went out onto the streets and sat down on the steps with his head in his hands. When police spoke to him, they noticed scratches on his face and arm along with some fairly fresh bruises. He said the scratches came from a cat. He was asked to come in for a polygraph test which shows signs of deception. But as always, a polygraph test is not admissible and this wasn't enough for them to hold him. They asked him to submit a DNA sample before he left, which he did. And with this, he was let go while they awaited the results. New Haven police have made an arrest in the killing of a Yale University graduate student, Annie Lay. Before the sun came up this morning, unmarked cars had surrounded this Motel 8 in Cromwell, Connecticut. FBI agents, local police all gathered here, waiting for word from New Haven's police chief. They knew the arrest warrant was coming for 24-year-old Raymond Clark III. The lab technician who worked in the same building where Yale grad student Annie Lily did her research. He was inside a motel room here with his father. Authorities got the green light shortly after 8 this morning. Immediately, barricades went up on the highway in front of the motel, and a team of FBI agents raced up the back stairs straight to room 214. There, they found Raymond Clark in a white shirt, tan pants, and soon he was wearing handcuffs. Hidden behind tinted windows, he was brought into the New Haven Police Department. "Hey, big man, enjoy jail." And then just 2 hours after Clark's arrest. "All right, This is number 15, Raymond Clark. He was arraigned in court in the murder of Annie Lay. ABC News has learned authorities have been closely following Clark for days. First quietly following him, then the surveillance soon became more overt as Clark quickly became the primary person of interest. They need something to link. Renowned forensics expert Dr. Henry Lee served as state police commissioner in Connecticut. Now he runs his own forensics center at the University of New Haven. He helped advise the forensics team working this case in recent days and says those access cards have provided a timeline. Inside that lab building on the last day Annie Lay was seen alive, revealing any opportunities a suspect would have had to harm Annie Lay. What could those swipe cards tell us? They tell us they have a means and opportunity. These two are going to be together, and there are reports of the cards, the swipe cards, put them both in that room, the last room where she was. That's become very crucial information. And there was one more thing police were waiting for. The DNA last night with Raymond Clark clearly the prime suspect and yet still a free man. The New Haven police chief said it would take just one thing. If we have one match on a person that we know was at that location, we will be going for an arrest warrant. And then this morning, Dr. Lee learned of the arrest. When you heard of that arrest this morning, did that say to you right away there must have been a DNA match? Yes, I know DNA had a match. And of course, it's a relief. Tonight, Raymond Clark has been moved to a maximum security prison in Suffield, Connecticut. And New Haven's police chief continues to believe there was only one killer in this case. The chief said today that Annie Lay and Raymond Clark never had any kind of romantic relationship. Today, the family of Annie Lay's fiancé, the man she was supposed to have married last weekend, released a statement saying, "We want to thank all of those who were involved in preparations for a wedding that was not to be, for their quiet understanding." A total of 4 search warrants and the results of the DNA test had finally confirmed that he was Annie's killer. The bloody sock found in the wall and the lab coat Ray was wearing contained both sets of DNA. Ray had signed into the building that day with a green pen. A green pen was found under Annie's body with both hers and Ray's DNA on it. This, along with the keycard data and camera footage, cemented everything. They believe Annie was killed just before the fire alarm went off. Ray quickly changed his scrubs which had blood on them and left Annie in the lab before heading out. When the alarm went off, before hurrying back in, moving her body through G22 and then forcing her behind the panel. Investigators say they have more than enough physical evidence to convict Clark and may not even need to establish a motive. You know, the only person that really truly knows the motive in this crime is the suspect. What made him do what he did? And we may not know until trial, but we may never know. Today's New York Post reports Lay's body was so mangled with broken bones it wasn't recognizable. And that Raymond Clark may have accidentally tripped a fire alarm with his or Lay's security swipe card. Clark's attorney, Joseph Lopez, plans to file a complaint over what he claims are excessive leaks from police to the media. As Annie Lay's family prepares for their final goodbyes, Pastor Dennis Smith asked for prayers for 2 families in need. Who knows what happened exactly? If he is the individual that did it, he certainly needs our prayers and his family needs our prayers. All police could find that might have pointed to some sort of motive was an email. On the day Annie was killed, she sent out a mass email to the whole building saying that she was getting married on the 13th and would be away for a few days on her honeymoon. Ray had opened this email. Ree was engaged to be married, too, and police could only speculate on this, but they wondered if Ree had had a secret obsession with Annie for a while, and reading this email spiraled into a fit of jealousy and rage. He was held on a $3 million bond, and his lawyer told people he was expected to plead not guilty. Annie would soon be laid to rest and her funeral was broadcast live online. Her mother Vivian made an emotional speech. "John, even now Annie is gone, but I still have you and love you very much. Like my son Christopher. I think that I speak on behalf of all of us gathered here when I say that I will never fully understand why this has happened or what happened to my sister. But since those questions are beyond our understanding, I think it is best to consign ourselves to the will of God and put faith and providence. Over the past few weeks, I have been reflecting on the role of my sister in my life. And only now do I realize how important she was to me. Annie was always the same little girl that has and will always be in our hearts and in our prayers. J2, I miss you and I will always love you." Jonathan also wore the wedding ring Annie should have given him. Despite initially pleading not guilty, Ray Clark soon changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to murder in exchange for a 44-year sentence. He was also found guilty of attempting to commit a sexual assault. The sexual assault plea was entered into Connecticut's Alfred Doctrine, which means the defendant doesn't agree to the facts, but acknowledges that the state has enough evidence to gain a conviction. Ray Clark is scheduled for release in 203. He will be almost 70 years old. Ray's father, Raymond Clark Jr., said, "It is with a heavy heart that I stand here before you today. We will live out our life knowing that he is behind bars, but we are proud of Ray for taking responsibility for his actions and pleading guilty. I want you to know that Ray has expressed extreme remorse from the very beginning. I can't tell you how many times he has sobbed uncontrollably, telling me how sorry he is, telling me how his heart is tortured by the reality that he caused the death of Annie." Annie's mother did not attend the sentencing because it was too painful. But she said her family were happy with the result. Although Annie's killer was caught and convicted, the real reason behind her death remains a total mystery, as Ray has never said or explained why. A Yale spokesman, Michael Moran, said, "As the criminal proceedings come to a close, we renew our commitment to honor the memory of Annie Lay, whose joy of life and learning is an inspiration to faculty, students, and staff at Yale now and for the future." Annie had a bright future ahead of her in so many ways. Just days away from marrying her best friend and soon to complete a doctorate she had worked so very hard for. Annie's friend Natalie said she was as good a human being as you'd ever hope to meet. Story 5, Kaufman, Texas, January 31, 2013, 8:40 a.m. It was a cool, brisk Thursday, almost the end of the week. And as attorney Jenny Parks crossed the street to head into the courthouse, it was the start of an average day. Nothing at all could have prepared her for what she was about to walk into. Someone was lying on the ground, not moving, and surrounded by blood. It was her colleague, Mark Hasse. Mark had been shot 5 times, the final shot being to the side of his head. Ambulances and police would be there within minutes. But Mark Hosey would die on his way to the hospital. Mark was a well-respected and successful felony prosecutor. He was now the assistant district attorney and described as one of the hardest working, professional, and dedicated people you could meet. His brother and his mother were his only family, and his work was really his whole life. This had always showed. His reputation was fantastic. And whether you knew him personally or not, you respected everything about him. He was a funny guy, too. A big goofball that wore crazy sweaters just to make people smile as he walked past them in the hallway. Chief Investigator for the Criminal District Attorney's Office, Bruce Bryan, said, "I had the privilege of working one-on-one with Mark for the last year of his life. He and one other lawyer are the two best trial attorneys I've ever seen. To do something like this in broad daylight in the middle of the street was staggering, and to have gotten away and fled the scene showed a real level of planning. This was a methodically and well-orchestrated hit. There were no spent shell casings around either, so his killer had been careful to cover their tracks here, too." 1. Witness reported hearing Mark shouting, "I'm sorry," over and over again. Another witness described what looked like a shoving match between Mark and his killer. His killer was angry, and there was a lot of shouting. A mechanic working across the road had seen a lot, too. The shooter, a man with a broader build, dressed in all black, wearing a mask, got out of a light silvery or gay gold car, possibly a sedan. There was a moment where Mark and him exchanged some words before the man in black had fired at Mark. The shooter got back into the car on the passenger side. But he hadn't seen who was driving. The car was missing the number plate, too. Hoffman County Assistant District Attorney Mark Hasse was shot multiple times in the parking lot a block from the courthouse. Police are looking for one or possibly two suspects. Witnesses say were dressed in black. Police say there was a very short confrontation between gunman and High just before the attack. County Judge Bruce Wood, just an outstanding person individually, but he was also just a very well-known and very well-respected prosecutor for the District Attorney's Office. This is just a horrible situation, horrible tragedy." The 57-year-old Hasse had been a prosecutor in the County DA's office for 3 years. He was earlier a prosecutor in Dallas where he worked on mob cases. Investigators do not have a motive, but they describe the shooting as a targeted attack. "Certainly, we have the police, the front-line people on the streets, but whenever it goes to murdering a prosecutor like this, that takes it to the next level. We called the National District Attorneys Association to ask how rare it is for a prosecutor to be murdered in the United States. Scott. They knew of only 7 examples between 1967 and 2004. Mark had been shot very closely and facing his killer. The fact he was apologizing for something too added more weight to the fact that this felt very personal. He likely knew who his killer was, but the suspect pool was big and the investigation was already off to a tough start. As well as looking into Mark's personal life for anyone that might want to cause him harm, they also had to look at his professional life, too. Mark's whole job was centered around putting people in jail. So, there were no shortage of people in his past and possibly present that could be suspects. People that really hated him. Mark knew this, too, and often carried a gun with him for his own protection. On the morning he was shot, his gun had been under the layers of his jacket and coat, and he hadn't had time to pull it out. Was someone avenging a conviction? For themselves or on behalf of someone else? Was anyone else's life in danger? It really was unheard of for something like this to happen. There have been so little leads in this investigation that late this afternoon, the sheriff's department actually canceled the press conference they were going to have right behind me because there's basically nothing to report. You could see the anguish on these law officers' faces this morning when they had to come out and say after 24 hours or so there were no significant advances in finding who did this. What investigators are now doing is looking through an extensive caseload that Mark Hasse was carrying and also all his past cases, trying to look for clues of a retribution or revenge killing stemming from one of his cases. But he prosecuted some really bad folks. Members of the Aryan Brotherhood, white supremacists, Mexican drug dealers, meth drug dealers in this county. He was a good prosecutor, which means he prosecuted a lot of bad people. The sheriff says that has got them looking in all directions to see who could have done this. But right now, the only thing that's really changed in this story is the reward for any tip. It's up to near $70,000 for anybody who can help catch the killer. Mark had been a big part of the team, and everyone had just lost a very good friend. The district attorney for the Kaufman County Sheriff's Office, Mike Mlin, held a press conference. For Mike, this had hit especially hard. Mike was determined to catch whoever had done this and address the killer directly. My name is Mike Mlin. I'm the criminal district attorney for Kaufman County. The state of Texas and especially my office has suffered a devastating loss. Today, we lost a really good man. He was an excellent friend and a spectacular prosecutor. You will not be easily replaced. Anything that you people can do to accelerate getting our hands on this scum. I hope that the people that did this are watching. We're going to find you. We're going to pull you out of whatever hole you're in and let the people of Kaufman County prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. What's the part about this that hurts the most? The fact that I can't reach out and grab somebody and do something about it right now because I want them really bad. Mark was very well liked. He was a friend to everybody. Did you miss him? More than anybody knows. Speculation started surrounding gangs like the neo-Nazi Aryan Brotherhood or the Mexican cartel. In November 3, months before Mark was shot, 34 members of the gang were indicted on racketeering charges. Mark's office had played a part in this. And just weeks after Mark was killed, police felt they finally had a lead. A new question about the murder of the chief of the prison system in Colorado, gunned down in his doorway on his porch. Was his death somehow a payback for trying to break up a white supremacist gang which has been organizing in American prisons? 100 miles away in Colorado, the head of the prison system, Tom Clemens, was also gunned down on his doorstep. A member of the Aryan Brotherhood, Evan Eel, was the only suspect in his murder. Was Mark connected to Evan? Was Evan working on behalf of someone else? They needed to find him. Evan was flagged down in his car 2 days after Tom was killed. But as the officer approached his vehicle, Evan pulled a gun out from his lap and shot him several times before speeding off. A high-speed chase ensued and police followed him for miles. Evan suddenly crashed into a truck and although badly injured, he pulled his gun out as he and deputies started firing at each other. After a couple of minutes, Evan was shot and killed. Detectives concluded that he killed Tom Clemens as a way to redeem himself. This answered one of the cases. Fortunately, the officer shot by Evan as he was in his car survived, but it was yet another brazen shooting in broad daylight of someone in a position of authority and power. The same MMO as Mark and Tom. There was now a big question mark over everything. Mark was very close to Mike, and obviously the whole team. So, due to a conflict of interest, special prosecutors were brought in from neighboring counties to help. Evan was eventually ruled out as a suspect in Mark Hassey's murder after it turned out he wasn't even in the state of Texas at the time. Extra police protection and security often ramps up to support a community when something like this happens. But this time it was the authorities that needed support and protection themselves. Mike Mlin brought guns for everyone in his office, so they could feel safer going to and from work. His son JR said he was the leader in the boss, but also a fatherly figure to everyone there. It was paramount that everyone felt safe. And as the investigation continued at a slow pace, authorities would be faced with another equally shocking and baffling case. Saturday, March 30, 2013, Easter weekend. And we begin on this Saturday night with breaking news. Kaufman County District Attorney Mike Mlin and his wife have been found shot to death inside their home. And sources are telling News 8 tonight this does not appear to be a murder-suicide. The stunning news comes just 2 months after the murder of Kaufman County Assistant District Attorney Mark Hassey. Many were planning dinners and get-togethers with their families, including the Mike Mlin and his wife Cynthia. Cynthia loved cooking and baking. She would often take cakes into the office for everyone, too. And hosting a big family dinner was something she had been very much looking forward to. But when their phones started ringing out, people started to worry. Cynthia's daughter called her several times, and given everything that was going on, a friend decided to go over and check on them. But when they showed up at the Dawes house, it was already too late. 63-year-old Mike and his wife Cynthia had been shot to death. Mike was right by the front door. Cynthia was in the living area. Everyone felt sick and stunned. Police found the bodies of Kaufman County District Attorney Mike Mlin and his wife Cynthia inside their home in Forney, Texas, east of Dallas last night. A source familiar with the investigation tells CBS News. The couple may have been killed as early as Friday evening. Both had been shot multiple times with an assault rifle. In late January, Mlin's assistant, Mark Hassey, was shot in a parking lot near the county courthouse. Police have not identified any suspects in the murder and will not say whether they're aware of any connection between the cases. And neighbors say a police car was posted outside his home until early March. Mike owned a lot of guns and carried one with him wherever he went, especially now. He had been taking no chances. JR said. There were guns all over his father's house, but this had been no match for whoever had done this. There were no signs of a forced entry either. So, did Mike know his killer? Had he willingly let them inside? Mike had been shot 16 times and Cynthia 4, and this time the killer hadn't been so careful to remove the shell casings, so there was a lot more evidence to bag up. Mike and Cynthia's home security cameras showed that someone had entered their house and left just 2 minutes later. More CCTV from around the couple's street showed a white car driving around at the time they were looking at. This was different to the car the mechanic had seen, but they were along the same lines in terms of color. The security that had been put in place for the Kaufman County District Attorney's Office was increased to a level no one had seen before. It was unprecedented. All prosecutors and their families were given 24/7 armed protection. One day after the Mlens were killed, someone claiming to be the killer reached out to law enforcement through their online tip center. But unfortunately, whoever this was could not be traced as they were using an anonymous IP address. This was frustrating, but police did believe the person was genuinely who they said they were. They revealed things that had not been made public and told them what firearms and ammunition were used in the shootings. Via an email exchange, the killer then gave them a chilling demand. They wanted one of the local judges to resign before the end of the week or they would murder again. Do we have your attention now? Your act of good faith will result in no other attacks this week. We will not be stopped, the email read. People connected to both Mark and the Mlens and the district attorney's office, past and present, wanted to help and support as much as they could without involving themselves and putting a target on their own backs. Eric Williams used to work in the legal system and knew both Mark and Mike well. He said, as sad as it was, he was in shock that even people like him might be looked at. My heart goes out to all the families that have been affected by this tragedy and especially to the people that work at the courthouse. I worked there for several years while I was going to law school, and so I know that it's a tight-knit family and that this is devastating for them. What's it make you feel like knowing that you've been somehow wrapped up in this? It actually makes me feel that the police are doing the thorough job they need to. Police and prosecutors could not leave any stone unturned. While the cases continued to be looked into, it was time for friends and family to say their goodbyes. A memorial service is set for today for the Kaufman County District Attorney and his wife who were shot to death over the weekend. An overflow crowd is expected in a Dallas church for the ceremony to honor Mike Mllen and his wife Cynthia. No arrests have been made. Governor Perry is attending today's memorial, but beforehand offered incentive for anyone with information about the weekend murders or that of Assistant District Attorney Mark Hasse, who was killed back in January. Today, I'm announcing that my office is offering a cash reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to the capture and indictment of those responsible for the deaths of Mr. and Ms. Mllen as well as Mr. High. Cynthia was cremated and her ashes were placed in Mike's casket. A friend said they lived together, died together, and will be buried together. Together for all time. Who had Mike and Mark worked on prosecuting together? What connected them? There was only one name and case they had worked on together. Eric Williams, the same man that had been talking to the media and offering his support to the investigation and families. 46-year-old Eric had a huge list of previous positions that made him such a shockingly unsuspecting person. He used to be a police officer, a former National Guardsman, an elected justice of the peace, a member of the Kaufman County Chamber of Commerce, a CPS attorney, and even later a judge. His life was very different now though, as he had been convicted less than a year before for stealing 3 computer monitors. Mark Hasse had been the prosecutor and Mike had assisted him. When Eric had been caught on CCTV walking out with the stolen monitors, Mike Mllen had given him the option of resigning and just leaving quietly with a misdemeanor on his record. But the arrogant Eric refused and chose to go to trial before ultimately being found guilty. He was spared jail, getting only 2 years probation, but he lost his law licenses and, by the sound of it, a lot of dignity and respect from his peers as well. Interestingly, Mike had actually even put Eric's name forward after Mark was shot, and within a few hours the police had turned up at Eric's door, but they found him wearing a sling and very quickly determined that due to his alleged injury, he probably wouldn't have been involved. He was tested for gunshot residue on his hands, but this came back negative. So the officers left. And when Tom Clemens was shot, their attention had moved naturally. Anyway, detectives tracked down Eric Williams again. For a second time, Eric denied knowing anything about the triple murders. Police asked if they could go inside and Eric agreed, and this time investigators spotted something: guns, and a fair few of them. Because of his conviction, Eric was prohibited from owning any type of firearm. He admitted that since he had lost his job, he had been selling guns to make a living. You got rid of all of them? Police had enough to get probable cause to search his home, and the pieces started falling into place. Searches of his computer were chilling. He had been following Mark and Mike for months before they were killed, watching their home and running not only their license plates, but their neighbors' license plates as well. He had also made searches for the prosecutor involved in Mark and Mike's cases, seemingly getting a list of people together that he wanted out of the picture. They found a handwritten note connected to the Crime Stoppers tip line and a receipt for a white car which had been purchased under the name Richard Green. It seemed a pretty clear-cut case, but with Eric denying everything, they still needed more to get a murder charge. On April 12, the authorities placed Eric under arrest on charges connected to making terroristic threats. The following day, one of Eric's friends called the police, telling them he'd rented a storage unit for Eric. He didn't know the entire contents of the unit, but he knew there were guns in there. CCTV had showed Eric pulling up in the white car and going into the unit just before Mike and Cynthia were shot, and then again right after. Inside the unit was the getaway car, and once that was removed, they could see it was full to the brim with everything from guns and ammunition to different uniforms, badges, bulletproof vests, and even a pickle jar full of homemade napalm. Eric Williams was charged with 3 counts of capital murder, but he hadn't done this alone. Someone had been driving the car. They went to talk to Kim, Eric's wife. Kim had a lot of health issues, so neighbors said she rarely left the house, but it was possible she had seen someone talking with her husband or overheard some conversations, but Kim would reveal far more than this. A few hours into the questioning, she broke down and started crying. She admitted it was in fact her that had been the driver for her husband. She said Eric had been planning everything for months, seeking revenge for his conviction, and he wanted everyone involved in that to pay. She said Cynthia had been collateral damage. Kim admitted that she shared her husband's anger and was happy to help him. She also admitted to being addicted to OxyContin, Valium, and morphine, which she said made her more desperate in her decision-making. She said she was so drugged up a lot of the time, she really wasn't able to think things through. In the case of the Mlins, Kim said Eric had dressed up as a SWAT officer and lied about a shooter in the area to gain access to the couple's home. Given everything going on, Mike quickly let him inside, truly believing he was there to protect him and his wife. And in the case of Mark, Eric had worn the black mesh mask because he needed to be concealed when it came to any potential witnesses, but he wanted to make it visible enough for Mark to know exactly who was about to take his life. On April 18, Kim Williams was also charged with capital murder, but unlike Eric, she said she would cooperate fully and tell police everything to hopefully spare her something when it came to the sentencing. Kim then pointed them to Lake Tawakon, which sat about 40 m away from Kaufman, telling them they would find things in the water, but it was a lot of water and zero visibility. Over the next month, the dive team searched, and with just an hour to go before they called time on everything, they found what they were looking for. Inside a bag were more guns and a phone wrapped up. But once the black bag dried out, they realized what it was: the mesh mask he had been wearing to kill Mark. Although the exact murder weapon was never located, testing confirmed the ammunition at the storage unit matched the ammunition found in Mike and Cynthia's home. Towards the end of 2014, it was time to work out the trials. They chose to put Eric and Kim on trial separately, and Eric would also be tried for each murder separately rather than Mike and Cynthia as a couple. Prosecutors decided to pursue charges individually, so that if one case failed, they would have another 2 chances of convicting Eric. And because Eric essentially broke into Mike and Cynthia's house, it counted as burglary. Burglary with murder made it a capital murder case. So, the death penalty was a possibility. After months of jury selection, testimony finally started today against the man charged with murdering the Kaufman County District Attorney, his top assistant, and his wife as well. Former Justice of the Peace, Eric Williams, sat quietly through the first day's testimony with a paperback Bible in front of him. The victim's relatives, including the Dawes mother, sat a few rows behind. That's Mike Mullen's mom. Williams is on trial first for the murder of Mike Mullen's wife, Cynthia. The lead prosecutor, Bill Werke, opened the case, describing the motive that Eric Williams wanted revenge against the 2 men who prosecuted him for computer theft. He comes in with an AR-15. He cuts down a defenseless Cynthia Mullen in a blizzard of bullets. Some of the most powerful testimony that was powerful, even more so today, came from Cynthia Mullen's son-in-law. He's a Dallas police officer, and he and his parents were the first to discover what happened to the Mullens inside their home. I walked and took approximately 2 to 3 steps inside the residence, and my parents were behind me, and my mom immediately hit the ground. She just fell to her knees and started crying, and then she pointed and said, "There's shell casings right under your feet." This is a death penalty case, and Eric Williams' wife Kim is expected to testify against him sometime in the next few days as the prosecutors put on their case. In December 2014, almost 2 years since Mark was shot, Eric's trial for Cynthia's murder began. His defense team were pretty confident. Yes, police had found a lot of things that connected Eric to the crimes, but they did not have his DNA or fingerprint evidence or the murder weapon, the literal smoking gun. They argued the case was purely circumstantial. The prosecution had such a huge amount of this circumstantial evidence, it made for a really strong case, including everything that Kim had told them, everything on his computer and everything in the unit. and Lake Eric's lawyer said the emails could have been sent by Kim. Eric Williams was not the only person in that house who actually did type it who you do not know. There is not a single eyewitness in this case. Special Prosecutor Bill Weskey replied there was an eyewitness but he put a bullet in her brain. They described Eric as a ruthless killing machine. Eric approached the trial in the same way he did everything else. He didn't seem bothered at all. He sat with a smug smirk on his face most of the time, clearly thinking he was the smartest person in the room. Even as the jury left to deliberate, he remained cool, calm, and cocky. But after only 3 days on trial and 2 hours of deliberating guilty of capital murder, as charged in the indictment, you may be seated, Eric Williams was found guilty. A few days later, it was time for the punishment phase, and Eric's wife, Kim, took the stand for this part. The prosecution had been very strategic in not asking her to enter the court before this time. They wanted her testimony to be the final thing that the jury heard. Her words would tell the court exactly what a cold-blooded, arrogant, and vicious killer he was in a way that no one else would. She was the only person that could really tell everyone the full and shocking story. Before deliberations began, they heard revealing testimony from Williams' arraigned wife and confessed accomplice. In shackles and jail stripes, Kim Williams never looked at her husband when she walked into court. Prosecutors wasted no time getting her confession on the stand. Did you pull the trigger in these murders? No, I did not. Who did? Eric Williams. Were you a willing participant in these murders? Yes, I was. What happens once Eric gets out? He catches up to him and then I hear shots fired. How many shots do you hear? I want to say 5. Are you watching the murder? No. Why not? I couldn't. Once he goes into the Mlin home, what happens next? I hear shots. Loud. Yes. How many? A lot. What's going through your head as you hear these shots? That he's shooting them. Oh my gosh. At that time, were you happy about that? At that time, yes. Kim said that her husband had planned on killing Kaufman County Judge Early W.Y. and Senior District Judge Glenn Ashworth as well. The defense attorney for a former justice of the peace convicted of capital murder pleaded for mercy from the jury. Because if Eric's motive was revenge, then his revenge has been delivered and Eric is no longer at risk. We must stay in line with life without possibly a parole. The prosecution was satisfied when the jury came back again. A jury today decided there was no reason to keep convicted murderer Eric Williams alive, so they sent him to Texas death row. Eric Williams would be put to death by lethal injection. As he was already now on death row, the prosecution said they would not be trying him for the murders of Mike or Mark. They had gotten the result they wanted. Kim accepted a plea deal and was spared the death penalty. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison and will first be eligible for parole in 2034. Kim would also file for divorce. Eric was denied a new trial in 2015 and again in 2019, but he continues to file appeals. In January 2024, his defense attorneys filed again, arguing they did not have enough time to prepare for his trial and that Eric has brain damage. Prosecutors said there was a real irony in Eric waging a war on the criminal justice system. Yet here, he was now begging the same system to protect him and give him another chance. As of 2025, no execution date has been set. The lengths that Eric Williams went to kill everyone involved in him serving time for a crime he committed, but one that he could have just walked away from quietly, is as strange as it is shocking. In the grand scheme of crimes we look at on this channel, stealing $600 worth of computer monitors realistically seems so minor. He had been spared jail and outliving his life, yet he chose to become a triple murderer, ending up on death row, all over a conviction for theft. It really is bizarre that he thought the only way to make himself feel better about this was to take people's lives. There's just no words for how little this could possibly make any sense to anyone. But one thing is for sure, Eric caused so much destruction and left so many people's lives irreparably broken as a result. Chief Investigator for the Criminal District Attorney's Office, Bruce Bryant, paid tribute to all three victims. Mark was a great storyteller. He had the energy of two men. He was constantly flying up and down the stairs in the courthouse to deliver a file or get something needed for a case. The door to my office would bust open and Mark would come tearing in with his standard greeting of "Dude." I miss hearing that. I miss him terribly. Mark and Mike were two of the finest people it will ever be our privilege to know. Our lives are richer for having known them. If Cynthia was all warmth and motherhood, Mike was a warrior. Mike proudly served his state and country. It was obvious Mike and Cynthia loved each other and they were happy together, and now together for all eternity they have left us. He had great stories. He loved to tell tales of his adventures and I love listening to them. A couple weeks ago he promised to tell me about some of the places he had never officially been. Story 6. There was somebody awake and they actually heard your argument and your conversation between you and your wife. Really? What conversation was that? She's telling you to get off of me. Get off of me. And you're saying, don't leave me. Don't leave me. Early on the morning of January 1st, 2012, on a quiet street in the Grapevine Hollow neighborhood, the festive atmosphere turned to panic and horror. Ashley Falls, a young mother, was being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. Her life hanging by a thread after suffering a gunshot wound to the head. Her parents, who had briefly left the house, were in a state of shock as they returned to find the home surrounded by police and paramedics. Just hours earlier, the house had been filled with joy and celebration. What had happened on this New Year's night? Only one person could have the answer. Her husband Tom, who was in the room at the time of the tragedy, but his version of events was raising more questions than it answered. Ashley's family was convinced they knew the truth. Yet, investigators faced numerous contradictions and strange details. The mystery behind the doors of that house went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Early that morning, on January 1st, 2012, 28-year-old Ashley Fuss was taken to the hospital with a gunshot wound to her head. Ashley's family immediately believed they knew what had happened. To them, it was obvious that only one person could have been involved, her husband, Tom. He had been in the room with Ashley when the gunshot was fired. Known for his quick temper and controlling nature, Tom was the primary focus of suspicion for Ashley's family. However, for the police, the story was not so clear-cut. Contradictory evidence was found at the scene, requiring a thorough investigation. Witness statements kept changing, and Ashley's past proved to be just as complex as her present. Years would pass before new details emerged, casting a different light on the events of that night. The festive evening that began on December 31, 2011 was supposed to be calm and family-focused. Tom and Ashley Fiss hosted a New Year's party at their home on Zinfandel Street. Guests danced, drank, and celebrated. Tom and Ashley seemed like a happy couple. Just an hour earlier, they had been dancing together, looking lovingly at one another, much to the delight of their guests. But everything changed as midnight approached when Ashley announced she was going outside with her relatives, which angered Tom. The argument erupted suddenly in front of Ashley's family, who were the last guests remaining at the house. Tom began yelling at Ashley and her relatives, who tried to defend her. When their attempts to mediate failed, the relatives decided to leave following Tom's demand. Slamming the door, Tom retreated to the bedroom. Ashley's parents also decided to leave, leaving the couple alone. A few hours later, tragedy struck. Tom was frustrated by Ashley's family's involvement in their personal lives. He felt Ashley shouldn't have gone outside with her parents, especially after they had been drinking throughout the evening. He demanded that Ashley's parents leave. After they were gone, the tension between the couple only grew stronger. Once the guests had left, Tom and Ashley were alone, and the argument reignited in the bedroom. Tom claimed that their fight was rooted in long-standing issues. Ashley, however, insisted she would live her life the way she wanted, regardless of his opinions. Tom accused her of being influenced by her family. Standing by the closet as he changed into pajamas, Tom said he heard Ashley handling the gun kept under the mattress. Tom tried to ask her what she was doing, but before he could finish, the shot rang out. Emergency services arrived at the scene in the early morning hours of January 1, 2012. The police called in investigators from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation following allegations from Ashley's family. Her parents, Jenna Fox and Joe Redan, immediately accused Tom of being responsible for what had happened, citing his anger and aggression earlier that evening. At first glance, the evidence at the scene suggested Ashley had taken her own life. However, investigators noticed details that raised doubts. Crooked picture frames on the walls and items scattered across the floor hinted at a possible struggle before the gunshot. Divorce papers left and signed on a dresser seemed to confirm reports of tension in the marriage. Ashley and Tom had met in the spring of 2007 through an online dating site. Ashley was outgoing and full of energy, and Tom quickly fell for her. Ashley was already a mother to two daughters from a previous marriage, and their relationship moved quickly. A year after they met, the couple had a son. And just 2 weeks after his birth, they got married. In 2010, Tom adopted Ashley's daughters, and the family began living together. However, by the end of 2011, tension within the family was growing. Ashley's older daughters were 9 and 6 years old, and their youngest son had just celebrated his third birthday. The boy had been diagnosed with hydrophilies, which required several surgeries. The stress of his condition took a heavy toll on Ashley, who was struggling to balance her responsibilities as a mother with the difficulties in her marriage to Tom. These challenges created a tense atmosphere, setting the stage for the tragic events of that New Year's Eve. In 2010, Ashley Fall was terminated from her position at the North Colorado Medical Center. The official reason given was insubordination, with reports citing aggressive behavior. Although she filed a lawsuit for wrongful termination and won a settlement, the legal victory did little to resolve her other challenges. The following year, she began a brief affair with a high school sweetheart, which further strained her already fragile marriage to Tom. During the same period, Ashley sought help from a psychiatrist. She was prescribed medication to reduce anxiety and stabilize her mood, as she had been experiencing up to 4 or 5 panic attacks per week. These struggles placed a significant strain on her relationship with Tom. While Tom was aware of her affair, he chose not to pursue a divorce. The divorce papers, later found by investigators in their bedroom, were drafted by Ashley herself back in 2009. During a time when the couple had considered separating due to conflicting work schedules. However, they ultimately decided to stay together and work on their relationship. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Tom claimed that their relationship had started to improve. He had secured steady employment with the Weld County Sheriff's Office, working as a corrections officer. Meanwhile, Ashley found her own way of coping with life's difficulties. She began speaking at conferences, sharing her experiences raising a child with hydrophilies and offering support to other parents in similar situations. A few weeks before New Year's Eve, Ashley took a home pregnancy test that came back positive. This was a shock, as she had undergone a sterilization procedure after the birth of their youngest child to prevent future pregnancies. Despite the odds, Ashley believed she might be pregnant. To protect the potential baby, she stopped taking her anxiety and mood stabilizing medication. However, on the day of the party, December 31st, 2011, just hours before guests arrived, Ashley began her menstrual cycle. A second pregnancy test showed a negative result, which dealt an emotional blow to both her and Tom. That day had begun with a discussion about whether it might still be possible to reverse the sterilization procedure and try to have another child. Ashley's mother had originally suggested the procedure years earlier, but now the decisions were entirely theirs. Both Ashley and Tom expressed the desire to have another baby, and the sudden turn of events created significant emotional tension. All of this formed the backdrop to the events of that evening. The party at Ashley and Tom Fall home was lively. Despite the emotionally draining day, Ashley made every effort to appear cheerful. She drank, danced, and embraced her loved ones. According to her parents, Joe and Jenna, Ashley seemed happy and strong, just as she always did. They found it hard to believe that she would have willingly left her family behind. But Tom claimed that behind Ashley's outward calm lay deep emotional struggles her family wasn't aware of. Investigators paid close attention to Tom's version of the events that night. His interview began with a recounting of the day, how the negative pregnancy test result had set the tone, and how a small disagreement escalated when Ashley decided to go outside with her relatives. The argument spiraled into a discussion about Ashley's tendency to take her mother's advice too often. Tom said he didn't want to continue arguing and just wanted things to settle down. During Tom's police interview, investigators noticed scratches on his neck and chest. These Marks raised suspicions as they could have been evidence of a struggle. Tom explained that he had recently shaved his chest for the first time and scratched his skin due to itching, which caused the red marks. As for the scratches on his neck, he said they could have been caused by stress. The questioning grew more intense as the interview continued. Tom felt that he was being accused of a crime and insisted on his innocence. He maintained that he did not shoot Ashley and that he wasn't in the room when the gun went off. Meanwhile, investigators were questioning neighbors and examining the home. A neighbor, Chelsea Argo, reported hearing Ashley shout, "Get off me," moments before the gunshot. This account contradicted Tom's claims. When investigators asked Tom about the shouting, he denied it and said he never forced Ashley to do anything against her will. He explained that he simply asked her to stop taking advice from her mother as it was causing tension in their marriage. Investigators pressed him further, pointing out that the wound on the back of Ashley's head made it unlikely she could have shot herself. Tom demanded tests for gunpowder residue on his hands to prove his innocence. He also insisted that Ashley's hands be tested to determine whether she could have fired the gun. Despite his explanations, investigators remained skeptical due to the strange circumstances and conflicting evidence. While Tom was at the station, Ashley Fiss was in the hospital where doctors fought to save her life. Tragically, a few hours after her admission, they announced that she had passed away. When Tom learned of her death, he was devastated. He claimed that when he held her in his arms after the incident, he saw her breathing and believed she had a chance to survive. After 3 hours of questioning, investigators had not obtained a confession from Tom, but they also could not rule him out as a suspect. Tom became increasingly agitated, maintaining his innocence and repeatedly stating that he could never harm his wife. 4 days after the incident, Ashley's death was officially ruled as a voluntary act. Although lab tests were not yet completed, the medical examiner concluded that her death was self-inflicted. The case was closed, leaving Ashley's family in shock and disbelief. They felt that the investigation had been rushed and that Tom had received preferential treatment because of his job in the county's corrections system, which they believed influenced the investigation's outcome. However, Tom's role in a separate law enforcement agency unrelated to the investigation made it difficult to prove he had any connections to the detectives working on the case. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation was brought in almost immediately to ensure objectivity. Still, mistakes were made. Tom was not separated from potential witnesses at the scene, a violation of standard protocol. Additionally, his hands were not covered to preserve potential gunpowder residue, which could have served as crucial evidence. Ashley's family criticized the way Tom's interrogation was handled, arguing that 3 hours was insufficient for the primary person of interest in a case involving a suspicious death. They believed investigators did not seriously consider Tom a suspect until Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joe, insisted on it. Only after their persistent demands did detectives adjust their approach. But even then, the investigation remained superficial. Ultimately, Tom was allowed to leave. After the tragedy, Tom took the children and moved to another state, Indiana, to be closer to his sister. He enrolled in college to pursue a bachelor's degree and appeared to be trying to start fresh. Meanwhile, Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joe, refused to back down. They reached out to the media, calling for justice. In interviews, they described Tom's short temper and emphasized that Ashley loved life and would never have willingly ended it. It was reporter Justin Joseph who uncovered a significant new witness, 17-year-old Nick Glover, a neighbor of the Fallis family. Nick revealed that on January 1, 2012, he was home with friends when he saw emergency vehicles arrive at the Fall residence. He also claimed to have heard Tom tell Ashley's parents, "I shot my wife." Furthermore, Nick said he shared this information with Detective Michael Yates during an interview, but there was no record of his statement in the police reports. The absence of documentation raised new allegations against law enforcement, suggesting possible corruption and a cover-up. It was suspected that Detective Yates had intentionally ignored this critical testimony to protect Tom. In April 2014, more than 2 years after Ashley's death, the Evans Police Department reopened the case. Fresh allegations included claims that Yates had omitted key evidence and altered a witness's testimony to support the narrative that Ashley had taken her own life. Law enforcement officials denied any favoritism, stating that the investigation had been conducted fairly. On November 18, 2014, Tom Fiss was arrested near his home in Indiana. Despite being charged with secondary manslaughter, he continued to maintain his innocence. The case, which had gained significant public attention, largely due to Justin Joseph's investigation, left many questions unanswered. For example, bruises on Ashley's legs sparked speculation about a flashlight found at the scene, which some believed might have been used during an altercation. However, it was later revealed that the flashlight belonged to an officer who had attempted to provide first aid and was unrelated to the crime. The prosecution argued that during a confrontation, Tom seized the Taurus 9mm handgun that Ashley kept under the mattress, pressed it to her head, and fired. He then lowered her body to the floor and called emergency services. At the trial, Ashley's mother, Jenna Fox, testified that Tom had acted aggressively at the New Year's Eve party, using harsh language that led to a conflict. Tom denied these allegations. Later during the trial, Jenna mentioned that there was a history of mental health issues in the family. Ashley's grandmother and uncle had taken their own lives. The prosecution used this as evidence to support their theory that Ashley may have willingly ended her life. However, Ashley's psychiatrist testified that as of December 2011, she showed no signs of depression. The defense later presented information that Ashley had been seeing 2 psychiatrists and a therapist simultaneously, which resulted in her receiving overlapping prescriptions. Forensic expert testimonies about the crime scene were contradictory. Dan Gilliam, who had spent hundreds of hours analyzing evidence, argued that Tom could not have shot his wife. According to Gilliam, individuals who fire weapons in a fit of rage rarely stop after a single shot. Despite his conclusions, Gilliam was called as a witness by the prosecution. Another expert, Jonathan Priest, reviewed the case materials and visited the crime scene. He concluded that Tom had been very close to Ashley when the shot was fired. Priest reasoned that if Tom had been farther away, there would have been more blood spread throughout the room. His analysis was based on the timeline of when Tom reached Ashley and began providing assistance as documented by the first responders. The prosecution used this argument to challenge the defense's claims. The prosecution alleged that Ashley's emotional struggles were exacerbated by her unsuccessful attempts to conceive. An autopsy revealed that after a tube ligation, she could have potentially become pregnant, but at the time of her death, she was not pregnant. However, Ashley reportedly believed she had been pregnant 3 times in the 9 months leading up to her death, which added to her emotional distress. Psychiatrists at the trial highlighted how these circumstances might have significantly impacted her mental state. In April 2014, 2 years after Ashley's death, the Evans Police Department reopened the investigation. New allegations surfaced against Detective Michael Yates, who was accused of excluding critical evidence and altering witness testimonies. Law enforcement officials continued to insist that the investigation had been conducted fairly and impartially, dismissing claims of bias. Nick Glover testified that on the night of Ashley Fuss's death, he overheard Tom tell his parents, "I shot my wife." This statement became a pivotal part of the prosecution's case, especially after Nick's friend, Chelsea Argo, gave her own account. Nick's mother, Kathy, claimed that Chelsea had also heard Ashley shouting, "Get off me." However, during the trial, Chelsea stated that she could not recall the argument clearly because she'd consumed too much alcohol that night. Nick, on the other hand, insisted that he clearly remembered the events of that night, emphasizing that such a confession was unforgettable. His claims drew the attention of investigators, and Detective Michael Yates, who had interviewed Nick on the day of Ashley's death, came under internal review for failing to document this alleged confession. However, the investigation found no misconduct on Yates's part, and he maintained that Nick had never made such a statement to him. During Nick Glover's cross-examination, defense attorneys highlighted several inconsistencies in his testimony. They pointed out that after Tom's alleged confession, Nick continued to maintain a friendly relationship with him, participating in family activities, including camping trips and Christmas celebrations. When questioned about why he acted this way, Nick responded over 90 times with, "I don't remember." Later, former Weld County Sheriff's Deputy Chris Graves also came forward, claiming he had heard Tom confess. According to Graves, he arrived at the scene and heard Tom shouting, "I can't believe I shot her. I can't believe she's dead." However, the defense pointed out inconsistencies in Graves' account. The crime scene was crowded with personnel from multiple agencies, family members, and neighbors. Yet, no one else reported hearing Tom's alleged outburst. Graves also did not detain Tom at the scene, explaining that it was outside his jurisdiction. Additionally, the defense noted that Chris Graves had not filed any reports about his statements for 3 years following the incident. He was later dismissed from the sheriff's office for dishonesty, further undermining his credibility. These factors cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. Many physical pieces of evidence also failed to support the prosecution's theory. Gunshot residue tests conducted on Tom's hands showed no traces, while residue was found on both of Ashley's hands. Scratches on Tom's chest, which might have indicated a struggle, contained no traces of Ashley's DNA. Likewise, nail scrapings from Ashley revealed no DNA from Tom. These findings raised serious doubts about the claim that there had been a physical altercation between the couple before the shot was fired. Tom Fiss chose not to testify in his own defense. The trial lasted several weeks, during which more than 40 witnesses were called to testify. The defense's closing arguments focused on Ashley's mental health and the significant challenges she had faced in the months leading up to her death. Repeated pregnancy tests, her son's illness, prescription medications, job loss, and an affair. According to the defense, these factors could have contributed to the tragedy. A surprising development during the trial was the introduction of Ashley's alleged farewell letters. In these letters, she apologized to Tom, referred to herself as a failure, and wrote that she could no longer continue living. Ashley's family expressed doubts about the authenticity of these letters, as they had only learned of their existence years after her death. Her relatives claimed they had never seen any signs that Ashley might have written such letters and believed they were fabricated. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, including a 1-hour lunch break, the jury reached its verdict. Tom Fles was found not guilty of second-degree manslaughter and all related charges. The decision was a devastating blow to Ashley's family. Her parents, Jenna Fox and Joe Ragwin, firmly believed in Tom's guilt and filed lawsuits against the Evans Police Department, claiming that investigators had concealed or falsified evidence. They argued that Nick Glover's 2012 testimony had been ignored and that other officers who might have overheard Tom's alleged confession remained silent. Ultimately, their lawsuits were dismissed. Despite the acquit, Ashley's family refused to accept the outcome and remained convinced of Tom's culpability. However, they managed to a relationship with the children, securing visitation rights that allowed them to stay involved in their lives. Meanwhile, Tom Fisk continues to face financial challenges due to legal expenses and is working to rebuild his life while pursuing his education. Following the tragedy, the children remained in Tom's care. He moved them to another state to start over and be closer to his sister. He explained to them that their mother had passed away in an accident, but plans to share more details with them when they are older. Despite all efforts to uncover the truth, the case remains shrouded in uncertainty. Questions linger and each answer seems to generate more doubt. The story of Ashley Fisk is one of those cases where the line between truth and deception becomes blurred, leaving behind only shadows of suspicion and unresolved mysteries. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Nightcared. True Crime Stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.